man who followed me home. After my breakup, I had no choice but to move back in with my parents. I had been living with my ex in an apartment in Boston, and looking back, signing a lease with someone I barely knew was one of the worst decisions I ever made. My parents live in Western Massachusetts, which, if you know the state, means rural, quiet, and painfully uneventful. Not exactly my scene, especially in my 20s. I needed a job quickly, so I went back to the urgent care facility I used to work at before moving. The job was easy enough, but the hours were brutal, mostly overnights, which completely wrecked my sleep schedule. After one of my shifts, around 4 a.m., I stopped by a bagel place that had just opened. I grabbed a chicken sandwich and a salad, figuring I'd eat when I got home. On the way, I realized I was low on gas, so I pulled into a Shell station. It was nearly empty, like it always is, except for a single blue sedan parked at another pump. I paid inside, then walked back to my car to start fueling. That's when I noticed the guy from the blue sedan walking over to me. "Want to see a funny trick?" he asked. I already hated this interaction, but for some reason, I humored him with a fake, "What's the trick?" He started doing that old stupid trick where you pretend to pull off your own thumb. He looked down at his hands, then back up at me with this weird, almost sarcastic grin, like he knew how dumb it was but was doing it anyway. I forced a laugh and turned away, hoping he'd get the hint. But he didn't. He just kept doing it. I pretended not to notice, staring at the numbers on the pump, silently willing the gas to finish faster. The second I heard the click, I shoved the nozzle back in place and power walked inside for my change. When I came back out, the man was gone. His car was still there, though, and the hose was still fueling his car. That was strange, but I wasn't about to wait around to see where he had gone. Before getting in my car, I did a quick check of my back seat. I had seen too many horror stories about people sneaking into unlocked cars. It was empty, but I still locked my doors the second I got inside and drove home. I was relieved when I finally pulled into my parents' driveway. Home safe. I grabbed the spare key from its hiding spot, let myself in, and placed it back where it belonged. Then I locked the door behind me, as I always did. The house was silent. My parents were asleep. I went straight to the kitchen, eager to eat. That's when I heard it, the front door unlocking, followed by the sound of it opening and closing. I froze, food still in my mouth. I swallowed hard and called out, "Dad?" Silence. I didn't hear any footsteps. My heart started to pound. I stepped out of the kitchen and peeked into the foyer. No one was there. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe my dad had gone outside for something and just came back in. But I knew that wasn't right. I had just seen both of their cars in the driveway. I bolted up the stairs to my parents' room and threw open the door. They both shot up in bed, startled. With a shaking voice, I whispered, "Someone just came inside." My dad sprang up immediately. My mom, still groggy, sat up with a confused expression, but when I told her about the front door, she turned pale. My dad rushed downstairs, turning on every light as he went. I cautiously followed behind him, barely able to breathe. Then he checked the hiding spot for the spare key. It was gone. My mom gasped, covering her mouth. I felt sick. My dad started searching the house. I stayed behind in my older brother's old bedroom, feeling like I needed to check for myself. I looked under the bed. Nothing. Checked the closet. Empty. I let out a shaky breath and started heading downstairs. That's when curiosity got the best of me. I stepped into the dining room and crouched down to look under the table. And there he was. The man from the gas station, hunched under our dining table, staring right at me. I screamed. My mom screamed too, as my dad came running back up the basement stairs. The man scrambled out from under the table and tried to make a run for the front door. But my dad grabbed him. The two of them struggled. My dad was in his 60s, but he held his own. My mom and I ran forward, doing whatever we could, hitting, punching, anything to help. The man finally shoved my dad back and bolted out the door. We called the police immediately. Within minutes they arrived, but the guy was long gone. The worst part? He still had our spare key. That night, the police parked a cruiser in our driveway as a deterrent. My dad wedged a chair in front of the front door and slept in the living room with a baseball bat. The next day, he changed the locks. And with that, my parents' days of hiding a spare key outside were officially over. I can't shake the guilt. I was careless. I know that man had followed me home, probably with his headlights off, which is why I never saw him behind me. I don't even want to think about what could have happened if I hadn't found him first. All I know is that I need to move out. Soon. The trap at the Wendy's parking lot. I've always preferred driving at night. There's nothing worse than sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, and in New York, especially Long Island, traffic is just part of life. My brother lives in Florida, and I like to visit him as often as I can. It's a long drive, easily 18 hours or more, but I don't mind. I always leave at around 2 a.m., so I can be out of the city before the roads fill up. That Thursday morning, I did just that. I grabbed my usual coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, knowing I had a long drive ahead. By the time I hit New Jersey, it was after 3 a.m., and I was making good time. The I-95 is easy. It's just one straight shot all the way down. Around 4 a.m., hunger started creeping in, so I pulled off at the first food sign I saw, a Wendy's. I followed the signs through dark, empty roads with barely any streetlights, feeling like I was driving into the middle of nowhere. When I finally found the Wendy's, some of the building lights were on, and there was a single car in the parking lot. The drive-through menu was lit up, so I pulled in, thinking it was open. I waited. No one spoke through the intercom. I even said, "Excuse me?" Nothing. A little annoyed, I pulled out my phone and checked their hours. Closed until 6 a.m. That's when 3 knocks at my window nearly made me jump out of my skin. I turned, startled, and saw a man standing just outside my car, grinning at me. He motioned for me to roll down the window. I wasn't about to open it fully, but I cracked it just enough to hear him. "The place isn't open," he said. I forced a polite nod. "Yeah, I just saw that." Then he said, "I'm stranded. My battery died." He gestured toward the single car parked at the far end of the lot near the woods. "I have cables. I just need someone to give me a jump." I hesitated. I didn't have jumper cables, so it wasn't like I could help him, except he quickly added, "I have them in my trunk, don't worry." Something felt off. But I believe in karma. If I were stranded, I'd want someone to help me. So against my better judgment, I said, "Okay." He backed away so I could pull up next to his car. I aligned our hoods and got out, popping my hood open. He did the same, retrieving his cables. We hooked everything up and I started my engine. We gave it a minute before he tried his car. Nothing. "Try again," I said. Still nothing. He frowned, scratched his head, and pulled out his phone. "Hang on," he said before walking away. I could hear him speaking in Spanish too quietly for me to make out any words. When he returned, he said, "My friend said give it a few more minutes." I sighed. At this point, I just wanted to get back on the road. That's when I heard it. The aggressive roar of 2 pickup truck engines, both coming in fast from either side of the Wendy's building. My stomach dropped. This was a setup. "Oh, shh," I muttered under my breath. I ripped the jumper cables off my battery and slammed my hood shut. But it was too late. The 2 trucks pulled up behind me, blocking me in. I turned to the man, my heart pounding. He was still smiling, but it was different now. His grin was twisted, almost excited, like he was enjoying this. I didn't think. I just acted. I locked my car with my key fob, turned, and bolted for the woods. Branches scratched my arms and legs as I ran blindly through the darkness. I tripped over something and hit the ground hard. My hands sank into damp leaves and dirt, but I didn't get up. I made myself as small as possible, forcing my breath to slow. Then I heard them. Men yelling in Spanish. Their voices were getting closer. I clenched my jaw, heart pounding so loudly I swore they could hear it. Then, silence. Seconds passed, then minutes. I didn't move. And then, the sound of my car alarm blaring in the distance. I knew instantly what that meant. I waited, crouched in the dirt until the alarm stopped. When I felt it was safe enough, I carefully made my way back to the parking lot. The 2 pickup trucks were gone. The man's car? Gone. Only my car was left. And then I saw it. My rear window was shattered. I ran to my car, already knowing what I would find. Everything was gone. My luggage, my clothes, my shoes, my watches, my bags. Everything. Almost my entire wardrobe had been packed in that car for my month-long trip, and now it was gone. I stood there in shock. Then the stress hit me all at once, and I started to cry. Through choked breaths, I called the police and explained everything. They arrived quickly and took my statement. They told me they'd check the Wendy's security cameras once it opened. I already knew it wouldn't matter. The next day, the police called with an update. The license plates on the man's car were fake. The 2 pickup trucks didn't have plates at all. There's not much we can do, the officer admitted, but we'll try. I knew what that meant. I was never getting my stuff back. Those guys got away with it. I believe in karma, and I truly hope, that those bastards got what was coming to them. The man at the rest stop. Long road trips are exhausting, especially when you're doing the bulk of the drive overnight. I had a 15-hour drive ahead of me, and I was determined to power through most of it in one go. It was late at night, and the roads were nearly empty. No traffic, no distractions, just the hum of my engine and the occasional passing headlights in the distance. After a few hours, though, I started getting restless. My legs were stiff, my back ached, and more importantly, I really had to use the bathroom. I kept my eyes peeled for a rest stop, knowing I'd be coming up on one sooner or later. Sure enough, a blue sign appeared on the side of the highway. Rest area, 2 miles. It wasn't one of the big ones with restaurants or gas stations, just a small pull-off with a single building for restrooms. But that was all I needed. I veered off the highway and pulled into the parking lot. It was mostly empty, except for a single car parked off to the side, tucked near the tree line. Its windows were tinted, and I couldn't see if anyone was inside. I stretched my legs as I stepped out of the car, glancing at the other vehicle for a second longer than necessary. I figured the driver was either asleep or had already gone inside. Either way, I wasn't about to linger. The bathroom was dimly lit, the fluorescent bulbs flickering slightly. As I stepped inside, I immediately noticed him. A man stood in the corner of the room, his back to me, facing the wall. For a split second, I thought he was using the urinal. But then I realized he wasn't standing in front of one. He was just standing there. His head was tilted downward, motionless, like he was staring at the floor. Something about the scene was off. I debated saying something. A simple, "Hey, you okay?" But something in my gut told me not to. Instead, I kept my head down and quickly made my way into a stall, locking the door behind me. It was too quiet in there, too still. I tried to focus, but my nerves were shot. I couldn't go. I sat there, waiting. Then I heard movement. Slow, deliberate footsteps. I glanced down through the crack at the bottom of the stall door. He had turned around. He was facing me now. My heart started hammering. His shoes remained in place, unmoving. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't want to see his face. Forcing myself to stay calm, I took a breath, flushed the toilet even though I hadn't used it, and stepped out as naturally as I could. The man was still standing there, his eyes locked onto mine. His face, there was something wrong with his face. His eyes were too wide, his pupils dilated. His mouth hung slightly open, like he was about to say something, but never did. I didn't linger. I kept my head down and walked straight out of there. As soon as I reached my car, I locked the doors and started the engine. I checked my rearview mirror, my breath catching in my throat. The man was walking toward me. Nope. I threw the car into reverse, backed out of the space, and peeled out of the rest stop, not looking back. Back on the highway, I felt the first wave of relief, except for one problem. I still had to use the bathroom. I figured there'd be another rest stop in 20 minutes or so. I could hold it. And sure enough, another sign appeared. Rest area, 1 mile. I pulled off the exit again, relieved that this time the parking lot was completely empty. I parked directly in front of the bathroom, making sure I was in and out as fast as possible. As I was finishing up, I heard the door open. Footsteps echoed against the tile. They didn't stop at the urinals. They came straight to my stall, and then they stopped. I froze. I could see their shoes through the bottom crack of the door. They were standing right there. Silent, waiting. I swallowed hard. Someone's in here. Nothing, no response. Just breathing. My stomach dropped. I reached for my phone and quickly dialed 911, putting it on speaker. The operator answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? I spoke loudly, clearly. I'm being followed by a dangerous man. I feel threatened. Silence from the other side of the door. Then finally, footsteps. Whoever it was turned and walked out of the bathroom. I exhaled shakily, keeping the operator on the line as I stayed put. I told them everything, including what happened at the last rest stop. The police arrived within minutes, knocking on the bathroom door to let me know it was safe. I stepped out, shaking, and explained the situation to them. I described the man and the car I had seen at the previous rest stop. They checked my vehicle, making sure nothing had been tampered with. Everything was intact, but that didn't make me feel any safer. After determining that the man was gone, the officer and I left the rest area at the same time. I kept a watchful eye on my mirrors, but there was no sign of him. The rest of my drive was uneventful, but I couldn't shake the unease creeping over me. I had never been followed before, and I was almost certain that the person outside my stall was the same man from the first bathroom. It's terrifying to think how long he must have been tailing me. I always assumed things like this mostly happened to women, but now I know it can happen to anyone.